Hello, everybody. My name is Joseph Daly. I am a member of the TAC as well as Director of Cloud Optimization Services at Nationwide. I've done it a few other places as well. I'm here to introduce the waste reduction working group, as well as introduce our new premier members, Virtasant, and get some chat talking with Andrew Brixton, who brought up a really great related Slack conversation. So he's going to share a story here at the end. JR, can you be my mouse clicker? Thank you. So last month, in a fit of mid 2000s nostalgia, I started my own blog. I think it's going to do big things, blogging. So it's called FinOps Playlists. I talk about two things I really enjoy talking about. FinOps, love hearing all our governing board and new TAC members talk about how excited they get about talking about FinOps. I'm the same way. I like writing about it, and I like choosing blogs are the future. Thanks, Phil Purcell. I like choosing playlists, so I do the same thing. One of my topics was the two types of optimization opportunities I see on a frequent basis, just all the time. So usually there's a gigantic optimization opportunity that your mountains, those are filled with value, emoji face just throwing up dollar signs. Those are huge things, and they're not easy to go for. You need teamwork, collaboration, lots of effort, but they're usually very worth the effort, depending on scenario. There's also tiny molehills that if you address individually and say, hey, if you could right size this or you could turn it off, you'll save 20 cents a month. And usually the engineers will look at you, give you $1 and say, go away, never bother me again. However, molehills don't just go away on their own. In fact, they propagate. They show up all over the place if you don't take care of them. So JR, if you could do the mouse clicking to the next slide. How do you handle molehills? Because if you don't take care of them, they're going to go everywhere, and you won't be able to take a step without stepping in a molehill, ruining all your plans going towards those mountains. So don't be a Carl Spangler and go after each mole. And I know in Caddyshack it's a gopher, but stick with my analogy for me. Don't be Carl Spangler going nuts trying to kill every gopher mole manually. Do it. You remove that with automated compliance. So what you do is you go to that engineer who gave you $1 to go away and never talk to them again and say, hey, could you automate the fix for me? And they can't help themselves. They have to automate things. So they will automate your scheduled compute shutdowns. They will automate abandoned storage volume termination. They will make sure your snapshots and backup retention policies are in place. Multi-part uploads in your S3 buckets will get deleted, and tagging compliance, they will not like that they have to tag, but if you say, can you script the enforcement of making people tag, they will feel conflicted, but they will also automate that for you. So once you have these automations in place, basically take care of all your molehills. You'll have to monitor it to make sure that the scripts are still working, because they will break. But all of a sudden, your yard, instead of having molehills, gophers, moles sticking their heads up out of everything, ruining all of your cloud spend and giving you death by 1,000 paper cuts on all these little things, nits and gnats, it's taken care of automatically, and you can focus on those mountains in the distance, where all the value is. And that's where everyone, when you can start doing transformations, moving to containers, moving to cloud native services, re-architecting solutions to help drive the business forward and create more revenue for your teams. Now, just because I wrote a blog doesn't mean that is the only thing, or that is the only way to do it. There's other scenarios, there's other viewpoints of how to do it. I'm going to hand this over to Virtasant here next. I like how they took my analogy and just flipped it a little bit, kind of got it in different orders. I'm saying, it's beneficial to take over those molehills first, then go after the mountains. But I really like what Michael and Mel are going to present about slightly different take on it. So let me hand it over to to them. Michael, Mel?
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Realize that we have, Melissa and I have matching LinkedIn mountain themes. We're both in Colorado, though she's in Panama at the moment. Hello, Michael Kerns, founder and CEO of Virtasant. And actually, you can switch slide. Yep. Not going to talk about us, but actually talk about our heritage a bit, which is a bit interesting. So we come from one of the world's largest private software companies, and we've been working with, we're one of AWS's first customers, and we've been working in the public cloud since it started in 2006. And so a lot of what we do as a company is born from all the problems we had to solve as kind of a large private software company with thousands of products that we manage every day and 100,000 cloud accounts, et cetera. But we learned a lot. And I'm actually going to tell a story about how we started to approach managing waste and managing spend for some of our own products, as we were trying to figure this out ourselves. So you can go to the next slide. And kind of continuing with the mountains and molehill analogy, and I think I got the drawing right, hopefully, Joe. And so, we look at it, it's kind of the same concepts, but slightly differently, which is, and I'll use an example. So, some of you may be familiar with, we actually purchased a software company called Jive. So thousands of customers, millions of end users. And, we looked at, well, there's tons of waste in infrastructure. So how do you attack that? And we look at it generally as, you've got your big mountains, so big drivers of value that kind of unlock both value, but additional opportunities, molehills. And so the first thing we did is move it to the cloud, and that unlocked a ton of value in a lot of different ways. But it also started to allow us to do things like, discounting reservations, instance sizing, so things that kind of individually are small, but add up because dollars are made of pennies. And so, $100,000 opportunities to save money is a lot of money, not individually, but in whole. So we started to automate those things. And then you say, okay, I've gotten that one mountain out of the way and then a bunch of molehills. What's next? Move the cloud native services. So start to take advantage of kind of economies of scale and efficiencies in kind of natural cloud services. So one is go from kind of expensive database, like paid database to cloud native database. So we did that, and that unlocks a bunch of other things, like you can move storage types and tiers, like depending on what kind of storage you use. Consolidation, again, kind of mountain unlock both drives a bunch of value on its own, but then unlocks all these other things. And again, as Joe said, and automate everything you can, because kind of taking someone's time for $100 opportunity maybe doesn't make sense. But if you can automate it and you can do 1,000 of them with the push of a button, makes a ton of sense. And then you can get into even more advanced things. So in our case, in this one, we went to Kubernetes. That unlocks a whole nother set of things like spatification, ASG tuning, et cetera, that you can do automatically. But again, you unlock value just by doing the mountain, and then it frees up a bunch of molehills. And so for us, we tend to look at it iteratively so that, you can both drive value in chunks, control risk because you're not changing everything, but then you also get the big value up front. But then, there's a ton of stuff that falls out of that and is unlocked behind it. And that's how, for instance, in this instance for Jive, that's how we approach it, which is we moved it to the cloud with the cloud native storage and some other things, then moved to Kubernetes. And, when it's all said and done, we were able to drive a ton of value. So infrastructure costs down by 70%, operational costs down by 80%, but SLAs, so responsiveness, actually improved. And it's through this mechanism that we're able to drive that value. And that this is so kind of a spin on Joe's take of mountains and molehills. But again, as Joe said, the key is for the molehills, you can't ignore them, but to take advantage of them truly, you need to automate them. And
well,
so
and Michael, what I like about your slide is, and it's kind of something I didn't think about, is after you tackle each of those mountains, you're finding new molehills. You're turning mountains into molehills.
Absolutely. And so, because if you just do the mountain, then there's a ton of, eventually the molehills creep up and combine to the size of the mountain again, eventually. Right. And that's where, and I'm sure I didn't think to go into this, but you've seen the, cloud's more expensive than hosted stuff that's going around. And I think part of the situational truth of that can be you can let it get out of control. And some of that out of control is just a bunch of molehills, right? One day you wake up and you've got 100,000 molehills, and that's a lot. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Melissa Lorton, who's a member of our team, just to kind of to tie it together and kind of how we generally think about it and approach it, even for our own applications to help kind of manage waste in this capacity. So Mel.
Thanks, Michael. So going on to the next slide, if we can. This largely pairs with the FinOps lifecycle as a whole. So when we talk about mountains as well, we're talking about just getting that first increment to the cloud, huge mountain in itself. And then really playing off of the concepts in the FinOps of inform, optimize, operate. And through our experience, we also believe that one of the most key pieces is tying back to the original adoption pieces within this presentation, is making sure that we're giving visibility and driving adoption. And that adoption could be certainly from the executive persona. We have clients that come from the finance persona as well, but certainly at the end of the day, the engineers are the individuals who know the applications best, are able to make sure that you're maintaining performance, SLAs, making sure that there aren't outages. So always balancing those, but knowing at the end of the day, we believe that data is king. So whether, again, it's reporting into those executives, whether it's into your engineers, but really through this life cycle, key is enabling those engineers with the data. Very much of the DevOps and agility bents, making sure that we're empowering the engineers so that, Joe, whether it is that mountain and they understand the effort that it takes, or whether it is the smaller molehills, getting the initial adoption out there, knowing that business and technical requirements change, constantly improving, looking at the data, getting new insights. We also look at driving adoption, for example, through gamification that we've talked about on FinOps before. So at the end of the day, your engineers are problem solvers, enable them, give them data, drive the adoption, make it fun, and continuously improve. So moving along, JR.
And Mel, one of the I just got a message, and it was a really fantastic call out, is that all these automations and all these tackling of optimization opportunities, we shouldn't do them in a silo. You know, those should be done like by your centralized FinOps team, governing board, CBO, whatever it is that centralized oversight to spread it out through the enterprise and automate at scale. So
by all means, and making sure, frankly, that they have, if it is done in some individual silos, making sure that the engineers have the ability to give visibility and celebrate those wins. Again, whether it's gamification or any of your standard communication change management channels, because it really does bolster that feeling of contribution and accelerates innovation. So they could be also done in the silos, but then brought up and scaled to larger wins as well.
Absolutely, that's awesome. I'm also feeling that there was a missed opportunity with walk up music or walk out music to play some Van Halen Panama for Mel, but maybe next time. So with that, let's switch over to a practitioner story. Andrew Brixton from Citrix started a fantastic Slack chat. Love how we grab from Slack for our summits, and gonna invite him to unmute if able and share his story.
More importantly, before you start though, let me bring in your walk on Van Halen, if it's all right. All right, Andy, you.
Okay, if we can move to the next slide. What we were talking about and what Joe mentioned about the small, the molehills first, that's actually how we adopted it in Citrix. That's how we looked. 12 months ago, we started, we had no vision into our costs, our cloud costs. So that was one of the first things we needed to do. We needed to see what our cloud cost was to identify where the largest costs were occurring. And as most, and Rob touched on it earlier on in the chat, most of our cost is in the VMs, the actual EC2s, VMs, all in the compute cost. So what we did to look at this is we got the early engagement from and buy-in from our engineering teams. And the way we achieved this is by doing the small molehills. So we looked at the EBS volumes, the managed disks. One of the other ones which we got the engineers to work on was looking at moving. We look at right sizing and we shutting down instances, VM utilization, but we don't automatically look and say, are we on the latest version of that instance? So we looked at the latest version of the instances, went across all the regions and did a comparison as to what we could save by just moving to the latest version. And we made some significant savings, and it's the engineers who actually undertook that work. So we got the buy-in from the engineers. They saw the benefit that they were generating to the company. So they automatically started to buy in and started to get engaged with us, which is one of the key things that my team has been working on, is the engagement of the engineers. We use tools that are available from the cloud providers. So we use those tools, but you have to have a tool available for your vision. And then we've looked, once we've got the quick wins, we've looked at our reservations and our compute saving plans, and we talk to cloud providers on a regular basis. We also have meetings with our engineering team once a week. We have a forum where we discuss with the engineers what efficiencies they're working on, so that all the other engineers can learn from it and actually adopt the ideas that come in there. One of the things that we learned by talking to the cloud providers as well is that we've undertaken compute savings plans on the AWS side, but we weren't aware until they pointed it out that RDS, if you're doing RDS as well, you've got RDS in there, that you need to still undertake your reservations, because the EC2 instances that your RDS boxes are sat on don't actually come into your compute savings plans. So we actually had to look at reservations on that also. And once we've completed all the quick wins, we've got those out of the way, we're starting now to work with the teams. Now we've built up that engagement with them to look at the more architectural type of work that we have to do. And what we have to do with that is we have to provide them with the business benefit, and the cost benefit. So we undertake the cost benefit analysis to identify, because we don't want things in place that won't benefit by the time a product is going end of life. And we also have budgets that we operate with the teams. So we set budgets for in their production and staging environments. So they have budgets set in there, and we set alerting on that, so that nothing focuses the engineering teams more than their VP getting an alert that they're going over budget for the month. So they focus heavily on their costs. I could run through for hours talking about other things that we look at, etc. Really keen about driving costs down. We've got a target in Citrix that we have to achieve, and we're working towards it. We've had great success with the engineering teams and with my team identifying the savings. We've got a lot more to identify, but working through. So
Andy, what I really liked is that you took the next step. You didn't just solve the issue. You took the next step and built operations and alerting on top of that for progress, for continuing progress.
It's one of the things that the engineering teams like to see as well. They like to have that alerting and know how much they're spending. It's become almost a competition amongst our engineering teams to see who can get the best savings. So it does our work for us.
It's fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
Andy, thank you for that. And just as a call out to some previous work from a few months back, that issue of getting competition going and gamification was one of the key themes in the Getting Engineers to Take Action working group. Sorry, too many names. Riley from Domo, who just joined the TAC, was key in that. So, definitely folks interested in gamification, engineering action, check out the FinOps.org project in that area. And with that, I think Joe, Michael, Mel, Andy, anything else on this section before we move on? Oh, yes, of course. The how to get involved. Joe, you want to take it?
If you want to party like we do, if you want to party with us, get involved with the Reducing Waste Working Group. I'll chair it from the TAC. We're going to rope Mel or Michael in from Virtasant to be the tech leads in there and join the working group reducing waste room in Slack. Listed there, or email Tracy at FinOps. If you have any questions about the FinOps Foundation, just go ahead and email that email address.
I don't think Tracy agreed to that before the call, but
well, she's on mute, so.
You could also email membership@finops.org if you have questions.
And for those of you also with the working group format that you don't know, what we do is a chair each time, and that chair has to be a practitioner, somebody like Joe, who's not a vendor working in the space. And then we couple them with what we call tech leads, who typically can be vendors or can be anybody who's really just helps and supports that in the same way that Ashley was the chair of adopting FinOps and Michael from Accenture was the tech lead. So looking again to get that mix of voices in the conversation. This one's just kicking off. So next month, we're going to have these folks come back with a few key participants, as you saw with the first working group at the top of this call, to share some of what they found, what they're focused on. Frankly, I'm really interested to see where this group goes. I was a big foot dragger in launching this working group because it was one of the top challenges from the state of FinOps, but it's such a massive thing to conquer, right? Prioritization is where this conversation started. Do we get into usage reduction? Do we get into rate reduction? There's a lot to do there. So put your hand up with your interest in that area.